Earned value management. This is either your most favorite topic in project management or your least topic in the world or somewhere in between. Most of us who have studied project management, who have looked at it, really like earned value management or don't, because it's a very specific set of skills. There's actually certifications in earned value management that project managers gain. So this is an interesting field of study. I love it, but I love numbers and I love people, and earned value management helps you understand some of the intricacies between the two. Now we're going to look at this in a bit of detail, and we're going to talk about the formulas that exist in earned value management. For certification, you need to know the formulas. You will have questions on that to pass a test. But it's more important for you to understand the concepts of earned value management, because some of the concepts are valuable in every project that you will do. So let's look at it. Earned value management is really a technique that was developed that can balance and measure your project's performance and looking at the triple constraint, your scope, your schedule, your costs, and it balances between the three concepts. One of the reasons that I look at earned value management so strongly is that it uses the triple constraint. And I think that it's important for project managers to always keep that balance of what are we trying to do, when are we trying to do it, and how much resources do we need to spend. And that's an important concept. So here's how you'll look at it to digitize it. And look at the forecasts that come from it. We are looking for the problems. When we talked conceptually about cost controls, we talked about trying to figure out where we are, where we're going, and be able to forecast the future. We talked about some tools, one of which is earned value management. I believe that the concepts of earned value management are as important as all the tools around it. Why? Why? Why would I believe that? I believe it because it looks at the triple constraint and tries to predict where we'll be at future times. It allows you to digitize things. Now, there are some things that it doesn't do, or it needs great data to be able to do. I've talked about it a little bit already in terms of bad data or not data that is time sensitive, meaning that if you don't have the data for now, if you only have it for 6 months ago, it's hard to do forecasting and it's hard to do real analysis that can be actionable. And that, let's face it, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be actionable. Project managers are actionable. They get things done. And the older the data, the harder it is to make it actionable. So let's look at earned value management. Let's look at it as it looks at the scope, the cost, and the schedule of our projects, and it tries to provide us with accurate forecasts and looks at us able to look at the performance problems that we may have within our projects. A note about the history of the earned value management. Just a note, where does it come from? This actually helps you understand. It's from a pre-20th century viewpoint, from the factory floor, from when we were building machines and building processes. We were just starting to industrialize. We were industrializing and trying to understand the value that we could create. In the 60s, it came out of the engineering, the aeronautics, the space program of the 60s. Now, some of you are not aware of the 60s because you weren't there. I was, just a child. But historically, it was an important time because we were using computers for the first time and we were able to gain information. Data, turn it into information, and make it useful. So it's important to understand this didn't happen overnight. It's conceptually something that happened earlier, and that it is something that is predicated on the idea of having the data available to you. Now, it transformed into different things in the late 60s and became more used in governmental circles, DoD type circles. That doesn't mean it's a government, DoD, Department of Defense kind of thing. That's where it had the best sets of data, the most controls around the data, so the methodology could be instituted and used by project managers. It's important to understand that these were big projects with lots of money being spent and lots of controls were looked for, because we had projects in the Department of Defense and in the government that went sideways at times. And projects go sideways in every industry. It's just that we learned from these projects that we needed better controls of cost. And earned value management was developed from that idea that we really need it in this area. We saw it 100 years earlier when we were trying to develop mechanized systems, machines to build products, people and machines teaming together to build products. When we got to the age of the computer, we realized that we should be able to understand this better and have better controls of our, specifically, cost. Earned value management was used as a way of looking at the triad, the triple constraint, and be able to make sense of it on a regular basis. Maybe not daily, but regular basis. You could look at scope and cost and schedule, and you could balance them off each other. Beyond the government is now. The government was first, and it still uses it, but it uses it in ways that are maybe above the average project manager. And I don't mean it's done in a way that you can't understand it. I mean it's at a governance platform above what you're doing on a daily basis if you're working in the government. Because a lot of projects that are multi-million, multi-billion dollar projects have a component of earned value management built into them. It's built in by legislature now because they want to be able to track it. Why do I say this? Because that's why it's part of our certification, to understand the principles of earned value management, to understand that A, it exists, B, you can do it. C, here's how to do it. So let's move forward. Is a project ready for earned value management? How do you know? Does the project have a clearly defined objective? Well, we've talked already in scope management that a clearly defined objective, as detailed as possible, moving into the requirements of that project. It's very important that you have that. The work breakdown structure gives a map for earned value management. Earned value management does not exist unless you have that clearly defined objective broken into composite parts that can be tracked. So, does the work take place over an extended period of time? Again, is it a project? Is it something that happens, that starts at a certain point in time and moves its way forward? It has to be that way. Why? Earned value management is looking at work that exists over a period of time. And if it does, then it will be able to assert its tools, its techniques across that work effort. Earned value management doesn't work if the time frame is too condensed. So, does there exist a clearly perceived route to the goal? Again, is this a project? Is this something that you are going from point A all the way to the end? You need to know where the end is. That may sound easy to certain people, but we don't always understand what that end goal is. If I perceive a clear ending. Well, the C-suite may, but the project manager may not. Why do you think I emphasize this understanding of the scope, redefining it, restating it, and understanding it, breaking it into different steps with the work breakdown structure, taking each work breakdown structure element, each work piece, and understanding the activities under it? If you'll remember, when I was talking work breakdown structure, I emphasized a chart that had a control piece, a control account. This is where the earned value management can come in and make great inroads into the success of controlling costs, which is what we're talking about. It's all about money. It's all about money. Though we're talking about the balance between scope and schedule and money. But earned value management takes it and makes everything about the dollars. It defines everything in terms of dollars. So it digitizes it with a dollar sign. So if your project is ready for earned value management and contains a high labor content, so if there's one person doing this, it doesn't really need this type of technique. If it has a multiple labor pool, probably either multiple individuals or vendors, then this earned value management can be a highly effective cost control tool. And there absolutely has to be a formalized management structure. I mean, you cannot, I stumble when thinking about this, but trying to do earned value management when you don't have a clearly defined objective, if you don't have a project that lasts some time, if you don't have a clear vision of where you're going, if you don't have enough bodies that it makes sense to break it into this, because you can do this much simpler without earned value management with smaller groups. And you absolutely have to have a formalized management structure so you know who's reporting to who. Where's the connection? Partly because of the cost portion of this. The cost is associated through the management structure. Let me repeat that. Your cost is going to be repeated in the management structure, meaning the cost is associated with the manager. There are cost centers that have to be tracked. And if we can't track that, then it doesn't matter. One more time. If we can't track that cost consistently and on a regular basis through the management structure, it will be hard for us to do earned value management. Now understand, I'm not saying that earned value management is more difficult than it's worth. It's worth a lot, but it has to be part of how we formulate projects within the organization, how we set our cost centers so that we can track the costs back to the appropriate parties and be able to report effectively, efficiently, and timely on those efforts. It looks really easy, what I'm going to be going to. But again, the devil is in the details. Making it work for your organization can be difficult. For the sake of being certified and you're being able to understand the testing, the formulas are important. The concept is deadly in that you need to be a part of this understanding that everyone should be doing it. The questions are framed in that way, that earned value management is an accepted and, if not universal, it is a highly used form of managing the control of costs for projects. And I emphasize that because it's important for you to know from the certification point of view. The tool itself, I love. The implementation is difficult to be consistent with it. On a project level, on a portfolio or program level, it's easier, but again, it's what you're trying to get out of it. What level of actionable, meaning something that can be acted on, something that you can do and correct. If you want correctionable actions, you need to be careful how it's put in place. So, when we look at this, the last factor, if you're ready, is are you limited by cost or time? We will be on the moon by the end of this decade. That was said. Maybe not in those exact words. The understanding that we had a time limitation was important. And part of the creation of project management was predicated on that commitment. Cost and/or time limitations are a part of almost every project, whether it's acknowledged or not. Few projects that I've worked on, though there have been a few, did not have either time or cost limitations. Finish it whenever you're done. Even that is not real. Why? Why is that, we've heard people say, get it done when you can get it done. Well, they say that, but project managers know that we all have a limitation of time. We have 24 hours a day. And unless you're planning to be Methuselah and live for 1,000 years, you have a limitation of how many days you have. And we know that people have a limitation of the patience they have when they say that. So every project that's conceived as a project has a limitation of time. And because it has a limitation of time, it has a limitation of cost. The only limitation not mentioned here is the limitation of scope, what we're doing. Some projects, the scope is very distinct and can be achieved quickly, maybe for a large amount of money or a short amount of money, doesn't matter. But if the quickness of time, that it will happen in a moment, then earned value management is not needed. It's not that it's not valid, it's just not needed. It'll happen quickly. You don't need this because we're measuring things, and the pure effort of measuring takes time. So if it takes more time than we have time to measure and analyze and make the data into information and make the information actionable and act upon that actionable information and cause corrective actions to be implemented and put them into place. You see my point. Lots of things are there. If it's short, we don't have to do it. The project must have some length of time. It must affect cost, time. The large labor, high labor content in this idea is because there's lots of moving parts. And it comes out of experience. That projects with a huge is my word, high labor content tend to have a lot of information going on, a lot of effort that may or may not be focused on the result. So, let's look. If your project's ready, then let's look at it. Our earned value terminology. I mean, here we have some of the basic bones. Budget according to plan. Remember we talked about how much money you're going to spend. What's your budget? What's your final budget? Draw a line in the sand. There's my budget. I'm going to spend $1 million. Well, according to earned value, that budget at completion is your budget. That's what you've announced. That's what you've claimed. That's what you've committed to. You've committed to a budget. You as the project manager, and project team, the stakeholders, the sponsor, etc. What earned value management looks at is a reporting increment. Now, what does that mean? That means this budget should be spent across time. And I'm looking at the budget, and you can calculate that budget at completion, and you can calculate at a specific point in time, which is why things have to happen over a specific or a longer range of time, you can calculate the planned value. Now, what is planned value? Planned value is according to what you've said. You said you're going to do this work and you're going to create a product or service. And at a given point of time, because this project happens over a year or 2 years, if I draw a line in time and said at 6 months, you should be able to tell me how much value, based on how much I told you we would spend, and you telling me how much work is being done in this time frame, what the planned value is. I'll say it again. Over a specific period of time, say, the example is we have a year to go, and I planned to spend half my money in the first 3 months. Why? Because I have to upgrade, get materials, get a lot of expensive people to give me opinions. So in the first 3 months, I'm going to spend half my budget of $1 million. So at 3 months, my planned value at that point is what? Think about it. What did I plan to spend? Now, think about it. What is your earned value? You planned to spend that much. When we look at the value of the completed work, that means we're not talking theoreticals here. The theoreticals are in the, I have a budget, and when do I expect to spend the money? Because that's linked to your plan, your budget, your work breakdown structure, your activity breakdown structure. It can be linked into the work or the activities, usually work, but the work that's to be done. Earned value is about what you actually have accomplished, completed work, and you look at its value. So if I plan to do $500,000 in the first 3 months, but I actually did less, what does that mean? Where are we going? We're looking at the value of the completed work and the remaining work. We're looking at the planned value of the work, and then we're looking at the actual cost. So if I have planned to do $500,000 of work and I completed at the same increment $500,000 of work, then the value is equal to the planned. But what if I'm at that completed and I've completed only half that much work and I've spent actual cost $250,000. So if I plan to spend $500,000, I've worked $500,000, I've spent $250,000. Do we feel good? Or do we feel bad? Do we feel positive about it or negative? What if I've actually spent $750,000? Now, I may have planned to spend a half, actually spent or actually got the work done of a half, but actually spent a quarter. The point is, the numbers bounce around and they relate to each other. What did you plan? What did you spend? and what did you actually get done. What did you plan is the budget according to plan, your planned value. What did you actually get done is the value of the work you've completed, meaning the actual work you've completed. And your current spend is your actual cost. What monies have you actually expended at a given point in time? The first piece gives you what you planned on the budget. The second piece gives you the work you've done and the remaining work. The third piece gives you your actual cost and your remaining budget. And if they're at the same point in time, they can be related. If they're not, then it doesn't work cleanly, which is one of the problems with earned value. You can't say, I plan to do this much work in a month, and say, I'm looking at the budget of what I would spend in a week and the actual cost for 2 months. They don't work. The increment of reporting is imperative. It is essential. And here's how it works. Here we have our cumulative values on one pole. We have our project timeline on another. And we have our reporting increment. So on a project timeline, here's where we're reporting. And you'll see where we have challenges with this because the reporting increment has to be consistent across 3 different sets of data. And here they are. We have the budget at completion, which is shown here as a line across the cumulative values in the project timeline. So at the beginning, at the bottom here, we're at zero. $0 spent, 0 value incurred, but the budget is going to go up with a bump in the middle, right near the reporting increment, up to the top. This figure on the cumulative values is the top and absolute cost of the project when you started planning it, when you put that baseline budget into place. Now, here we're showing in a mock style the earned value. So what is this showing us? What does this graph show us at this reporting increment? At this time, the earned value is less than the planned value. So we've earned less than we've planned, meaning I've done less, earned that value less than I planned. When this was conceived on the factory floor, it was conceived as how much work are we getting? How much value are we getting out of this work? We've spent how much money on these employees this hour, this week? And what value have they created for the company? Here, we're looking at it in projects and we're dealing with this in a little different way, but the concepts are the same. You have a planned amount of value at a certain time. We have an earned value at that same time. We should be able to know that. And that's the assumption of earned value management. Now, the third factor is your actual cost. And here we have it marked in red. Actual cost is at this given time we've spent more than we planned and far more than we've earned. So the question in earned value management terms are how we do it. Because what are we about here? What are we talking about? We're talking about a process of controlling costs. We're managing costs here. We're not managing the work per se, but the costs. So if I say I've spent more than I planned to, and I've got less work out of it than I planned to, is this good? I don't think so. So in this example, we have spent more money than we planned, and we have worked less than we planned. So am I ahead of schedule? Am I behind on my budget? Am I behind on schedule? Okay, think about it. So the planned value is in the middle between the earned value and the actual cost in this example. And the idea is we're going to be looking at how these factors go off each other. Again, actual costs, planned value, earned value. At a specific point in time, you can bounce those off each other and get actionable data, information. But you have to be able to relate these factors, actual cost, planned value, and earned value, to each other at a specific point in time. So, the planned value, the cost of the work in a specific time period. Actual cost is the actual cost of the work performed in a specific time period. And the earned value is the budgeted cost of the work performed during that same specific time period. If you are talking different time periods for each of these values, earned value management will not work. I only emphasize that, and it may sound obvious to a lot of people, but I've worked with a lot of companies that pull data from various sources to get this information and then try and bounce it off each other. And if the information is not valid at the same date, meaning if you pull the amount of money you've spent for employees and contractors on one date, you pull the amount of work completed at a different date, and you look at your budgeted, how much you expected to spend, and if it doesn't all match, you will have bad information, frankly. So it's important to understand the philosophy, the concept, and the tool set we're using here. You must pull the data from the same date. It must be specifically for each piece. That assumption given, let's look at the formulas, etc. We have our budget at completion, which is our original or baseline cost estimate for the project. We have our cost variance. Now, this is the difference between our earned value and our actual cost. Think about it. If I have said that I have completed 50% of the actual work done on a project, but we've spent 40% of the money for a project, then I'm looking pretty good. The variance is a positive number. If the variance was a negative number, what would that mean? Well, it would mean positive things. It would mean negative things. The cost variance is in a formula you need to know for compliance and working your ability to pass tests on your capabilities. We also have the schedule variance. So cost variance means how far you are ahead or behind your budget. Schedule variance is the difference between the earned value and the planned value, which gives you the difference that you are between what you thought you would do and what you did do. This variance is expressed in dollars, but it's actually how far you are ahead or behind schedule. It's really a schedule variance because you said you would do so much work. Well, if you had planned to do much more in that time frame, that slice of time, that means you're behind schedule. You said you do this, you've done this. You're behind schedule. But it's based on dollars, not on a schedule. So you have to be able to put your scheduled work into dollars. You have to translate at some point, and sometimes we do it very early, how much work in a time frame based on dollars, not on how I've worked 10 hours, who cares? It doesn't matter. You've worked 20 hours, who cares? How much work did you accomplish? And that's what we have to be able to look at. So, more basics. Here is our cost performance index. This is even more useful. Look at the terms here. We have the cost performance index equals instead of the difference, we have a quotient. We have EV divided by the AC. So it's the earned value divided by the actual cost, and it gives us a percentage. It gives us a number that is, if these were, the idea here is it gives us the relationship between the value we've earned to the cost that we've spent. And if this is not clear yet, that's okay. We'll have examples with numbers. The schedule performance index, another one, gives us the relationship between the earned value and the planned value. Now, this is important because it shows you how well you're doing on schedule. Cost performance index gives you how well you're doing on cost, money spent. Schedule performance index gives you how you're doing in terms of schedule. Makes perfect sense. Then we have some forecasting tools. And the forecasting tools are things like estimate at completion. There are different computations that we look at here. We look at the estimate at completion in three different ways, depending on whether we think things are going well, or if we're behind, or if we think that we're going to change things radically. So, as a mathematician myself, I look at this the first time I saw it, and I doubted. I was like, why do we have three computations for the same thing? You say EAC. EAC should mean the same thing. Well, it does. The problem is we're not dealing with strict mathematical computations. We're dealing with people doing things. We're doing projects. And that factor means that we need to look at it in different ways according to our expert judgment that we've been developing over years and talking to people about and finding out that this is not straightforward. It can be different if we think things are fine, if we think things are behind, or if we think we need to adjust things. So we have different sets of computations. We also forecast the time to completion, and this is a time designation, and it's based on another formula. Now, I can see the eyes glazing over with a lot of these formulas. There are certain people who are not math comfortable. So you need to understand, you need to have a basic understanding of how these formulas work and memorize them. We'll talk a little bit later in a different section about prepping for the test. We've talked a little bit about what the test may look like, but we need to talk a little bit more as we get to the end, after you've heard some of this information and seen some of the detail. Here, we're talking about completion as a computation of time. This is our variance at completion. This is the budget at completion and minus the estimate at completion. This basically tells you what's the difference. If you had budgeted $1 million, but the estimate at completion was going to be $1.2 million, there's a discrepancy. This can forecast that discrepancy, and you can see how much more money you're going to need. It's either based on your newest information or it's based on your previous estimation, depending on what you used as your estimate at completion. Now you see the variance is dependent on whether you think you're doing well or not, whether you are looking at the current data and saying we're good or we're not. How much? This kind of forecast is very, very valuable to corporate entities and is used in high-level closing of projects or continuing of projects. I mean, if your variance at completion, because things are going bad, on a $2 million project, if your variance is $2 million or $1 million, they're going to look at that closely, right? Right? You look at things that are not going well. If things are going well, they won't be looked at as closely. This is an important thing. This will help guide decision makers and help you develop actionable steps. The estimate to completion is that number that states the estimate at completion, what you think you will spend, minus what you've already spent. So at this given point in time, on today, what do I think it will cost? And what have I spent to date? That's the estimate to completion. How do I get to the completed product or service, the complete project? All of these forecasting tools help you make decisions. But as you can see, I could spend hours talking about the detail and how these come together. How they have to work, how they are effective and successful is dependent on the data that is flowing in and not only the accuracy, but that it's given to the parties that are creating the information from the data in a timely fashion. So how does forecasting work when you're talking about earned value management? Let's look at it. If we change nothing, what will happen? That's the kind of information that's important to organizations that are running projects to know. If we don't change anything, I change nothing. That's what the difference in some of the formulas are about. We look at if I do nothing, what happens? Then we can look at other things. We can engage in corrective actions. We can look at what to change to be able to make affirmative, positive changes within the project, and what would those results be if we did? We need to look at that. So forecasting says, if we do nothing, here's what it will look at. If we engage in create corrective actions, what will those results be? If we do some changes, and that gives us information that can be used to direct the projects. We also look at what are some of the future issues that could be there, and how do we prevent that? Where are we at? If we do nothing to change, where are we going? If we do some things, what could happen? And how do we prevent things from happening in the future? Now, before I move beyond the title of this slide, which is Problems with EVM, you have probably noted that I am both for earned value management and I have my issues with it. Now, I don't have issues with it as a methodology, as a tool, as part of us controlling costs within our projects. The issue I have and the problems that we'll look at here have to do with the actual using it, making it work, because it's not something that an individual project manager can bring to an organization or a project and say, I'm going to use earned value management to manage the project because it's such a wonderful forecasting tool that will give me everything I need in order to control my costs and know where my project is. Yes, I'm a little over the top, but the point is there's some problems with the way that earned value management is used, and you need to be aware of them. When we're talking about our certification and doing the test, they assume when they talk about earned value management that none of these problems are there. Or if they are, they will note them in the questions. So understand that there are some things we have to be aware of with earned value management. They include data consistency. Are you getting the right data from the right sources, and is it consistent with the other data you're comparing it to? Remember the three pieces that we talked about. We have the planned value, we have the earned value, we have the actual cost. Those are the three key pieces of data. Are they coming from the same time frame, from the same source, and are they consistent? That may sound easy, but it's not. In practical senses, we pull that data differently out of different systems in different situations. So you need to make sure, as the project manager, if you're using this for actionable means, meaning that you're going to take it and do something with it, that your data is consistent, because it's a huge problem if it's not. What do I mean by consistency? Are you coming from the same source? Are you coming from the same time frame? Those two factors alone can be monumentally crippling for the end information that you want to be actionable. So beware. Timeliness, again, time frame. Is it correct, consistent, timely? Some people say this is the most accurate data we have. Boom. Well, it's a month old. Are you comparing it with newer data? Are you looking at it as accurate now? We may have had monumental changes between the time of the data pull that you're talking about and mine. Now, these days we get data a lot quicker because of the technology changes than when we started looking at earned value management back in the 60s and 70s. But we still need to ask the question, when is this data valid for? When was it pulled? What is the timeliness? We look at acceptance from the management. It doesn't matter if the project management team, the project management office, the program management office, or simply IT accepts the idea of using earned value management. Upper management acceptance, the C-suite acceptance of earned value management needs to be there. Generally speaking, on a bright note, they drive this because it's looked at from a C-suite, from a governance standpoint, as being wonderful techniques to use. The problem comes when they expect it and they don't give the tools or the power to get the proper data or the effective data or the timeliness, etc. So there's still a negotiation there that has to go on. There still is a understanding what you're trying to accomplish as opposed to what is being offered. A lot of times we get told, fix it. Well, how much are you willing to spend or to do or discomfort to having a problem fixed? We are not different in corporate or organizational life than we are at home. So just breathe and understand. I'm trying to point out things that are obvious, but we may not think through. Our first glimpse at a lot of things are that why isn't everyone using this? And earned value management has that feel to it. Well, if we can compare these data sets together and get this information and make these forecasts, then why wouldn't we do it? And the answer is because it's not as easy as that. You have to have data consistency, timeliness. Management has to be accepting of it. You have to have your team's commitment, because if you're not committed, the team isn't committed to getting you the information or reporting the information. Think of it this way. If you have a team of employees that are working for you, imagine that how many of them report their hours consistently. Okay. Now imagine how many report their hours consistently and maybe they make a mistake occasionally. Okay. Now imagine you're dealing with consultants, contractors, and vendors. And you're dealing with different systems. And it's not, I can go to somebody. I can go to Bobby and ask him, your hours aren't in. Oh, we'll make it happen. Everything is pretty much automated today. Not always, but it's getting close. And I'm just talking the hours that people work. If you have vendors and contractors, it gets more convoluted. And you could report with an asterisk that the actual hours equated to cost so AC in earned value management lingo, actual cost, could be calculated for a certain time period. But what if someone makes a mistake? How big of a factor do you need to have to keep the accuracy going? That's why large groups are suggested, big projects. Small projects, if I forget to put my hours in, or if I make a grievous error, or if I have a system down that doesn't report the hours in a timely fashion, and we pull a report at the wrong time, it could look bad, and then we spend cycles and time and energy trying to look at, is this actionable, when the reality is the data was flawed. Team commitment is important because you need to make sure everybody knows what you're doing with earned value management, how this affects the team, how this affects the project, because it's either going to be something that is helpful or it will be a time drain to the team, the company, the project. So it's important. Earned value versus good value. Sometimes we need to think about it. How much do we do for a process as opposed to how much time and energy we spend to earn the value, build the value of the products that we're doing? There's a lot of groups and companies that have never embraced earned value management on a project by project basis. And the reason is quite simple, because they don't see the value in it. They understand the concepts. We all can. But they don't see that it earns them more money, that the projects are more profitable. Where it's hugely successful is on huge projects that are trying to prove both a vendor, provider of information, provider of service, provider of product, are trying to prove that they are on track, online. Yes, we're going to Mars in 5 years, and we're 2 years into this, and you've spent all this money, and here's what we've done. Or we're building this skyscraper on the edge of the world, and it's going to take us 5 years. And yes, we are on time and on budget, or we're behind in certain areas, and here they are. Our estimate to completion is X at this point. Where this is used is different ways, and we'll talk about that. The benefits of earned value management, and I don't mean to emphasize the problems with it, but I point them out because I was one of those people who looked at it when I first saw it and said, ooh, why don't we all do this? And then I looked at the practical application and realized, oh, because the way that organizations work, it's not always easy to match the data, to understand what to do with it, to have upper management be supportive. But there are benefits. It gives you an early warning system. If you put this in place and you put this in a situation where you can look at it on a regular basis, think of it as an alarm system. Your data is consistent, it's pulled at the same time, it's matched well. And you can know, am I on schedule? Am I on budget? Most of us project managers have a clue about that because we look at those numbers and we have a clue. Earned value management gives it another oomph because of the way it's constructed, but it's a wonderful early warning system. If the managers and the occupants of the C-suites looked only at this slide and said, oh, let's do earned value management. It gives the project an early warning system and supports timely corrective actions. Why wouldn't we want that? It's a wonderful thing. I've told you the negative. Here's the positive. It also gives you accurate forecasts that empower you into better decisions. It's a great thing. You put it in place. It is a wonderful set of equations, tools, techniques, thought processes that help you be successful and help you not only be successful today, but forecast your problems and your solutions in the future. And it is a way of viewing progress. And when your sponsors buy in, give you the tools, have the data available, it gives them confidence that when you walk into an executive meeting and you say, my $50 million project is on time, on budget, and on scope, that you actually have a clue, because you can say, here is the schedule performance index for the project based on data pulled from XYZ date. We're on schedule. Here's our cost performance index. We're on budget. Or we're not. Executives pull this information, and we'll look at this a little. Executives pull this information and use this kind of data because it gives them a higher level view. Project managers sometimes don't use the earned value management control tools because they're either too difficult, the data's not there, or they're in the middle of it. They have a feel for, am I on schedule? Am I on budget? So just understand that. It's a great visibility point. So here's an exercise. And I put few of these in here, but I want you to look at this. I want you to see this as something that you can take offline and determine. Right now, you're a training project, and you're auditing this project as a peer of the project manager. And the project is designed to be earned value friendly, meaning you get all the information. The data is there. It's not hidden, and you don't have to figure out and concoct or ask about it. It's day 51. You've spent 44 and change for it. You have the first 3 activities are complete. The 4th is 50% complete. What I'm asking you to do is just determine the earned value, the planned value, the cost performance index, the cost variance, the schedule performance index, the schedule variance, the estimate at completion, and the estimate to completion. So what I want you to do right now, look at this. Take a minute and answer the questions. And now that you've had a chance to look at it, or not, here's our exercise. It's earned value management. We're looking at this slide. I've broken this down. Now, if you want to, you can take another minute, put me on pause, and look at this and see where you are. Just so you know, we have our activities with ID numbers, durations, our predecessors, our budget, our status, and we're calculating we will be calculating our planned value and earned value. I've given you the actual cost that we've spent. So look at this. And here are our answers. We give you a lot of information with this course, and understand it's not the only source. There are a lot of things out there that are free to the public as well. What we're giving you is some basic understanding and valid, solid, foundational work. If you feel challenged with the mathematics that we are doing with this formula work, then I want you to look over this and view this type section repeatedly and think about it. This is very straightforward kind of formula work. So here are the answers. I'm not going to go through things in detail. The answers are fairly self-explanatory. So look at it and try and embrace what is being talked about with earned value management. It's a good tool. It helps us control the costs of our projects. It helps us control our project costs in a bigger sense. So if you look at this from a C-level upper management point of view, you can see that this is a good and valid methodology. Our answers here, and here we've done our cost management. The project cost management part of this, there's a lot of pieces to it because the budget, the monies we spend mean a lot. We have the 4 different processes that exist within this knowledge area. But knowing about cost management, knowing about budgets, how to create a plan for them, how to create a budget itself, how to predict and to control our cost as we move forward is very important. Project managers do not succeed without understanding budgets and monies and how they are created. And now our key information on this section. We're talking about cost management, and I throw in earned value management at the bottom. Why? Because it's the biggest part of the certification that you get in terms of the information and knowledge and the heartache that some people have. But other terms you need to know. Direct cost. What's the direct cost of your project? You need to understand that projects don't always have earned value. To control them, they have direct costs, indirect costs. You need to understand the term and understand what rough order of magnitude is. How do we create that? And you'll hear ROM. And we love acronyms. We love acronyms. So if you hear ROM, please ask to make sure they're clear with what they mean by ROM. Here we mean rough order of magnitude. We have basis of estimates, an important term. What's your basis of your estimate? It can be something that your boss or your manager or other people will ask you, what is the basis? So understand that concept. as well as the return on investment. Return on investment will come up over and over again. We'll touch upon it in the procurement when we talk about contracts, but return on investment is something to understand. Our performance measurement baseline is basically, remember the triple constraint: your scope, your budget, your schedule. That is your performance measurement baseline. Your performance measurement baseline leads us to both the net present value, which we calculated, and the earned value management. The earned value management needs the performance measurement baseline in order to function, because it is the triple constraint. And you can't function without putting a line in the sand and saying, here's where we're going, here's what we commit to, which is your performance measurement baseline. It helps you with the earned value management, and it is crucial to understanding how to control costs and cost management.